Okay, thank you for coming. NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy, it's Homendy, is going to provide an update on the NTSB's investigation into the accident on I-70 yesterday in Etna, and then she'll take some questions. Also with her will be the investigator in charge, Kenny, K-E-N-N-Y, Bragg, B-R-A-G-G.
Peter forgets that he's much taller than I am. All right. As Peter mentioned, my name is Jennifer Homendy, and I'm chair of the National Transportation Safety Board. And with me today is our investigator in charge, Kenny Bragg. Also with me today is Colonel Charles Jones, Superintendent of the State Highway Patrol. Colonel Jones is going to make a statement after I speak, and then I'll come back up and we'll start questions. So the National Transportation Safety Board is an independent federal agency charged by Congress with investigating every civil aviation accident in the United States, some abroad, and then we investigate significant events in all other modes of transportation. Our goal at the end of any investigation is to issue safety recommendations that, if implemented, would prevent that tragedy from reoccurring. I do want to start, before I get into what we've been doing, I do want to stop and say a few words to the families who lost loved ones in this horrible tragedy, and survivors. I can't imagine what you've gone through since this crash and what challenges lie ahead for you. But just know that the NTSB will be thinking of you and working diligently on this investigation, and even after the investigation, to implement our recommendations to prevent it from reoccurring. So we'll be thinking of you in the days, weeks, months ahead, and our hearts go out to you. So today was the first day where we began our work. We arrived pretty late last night, around 10 p.m. We still had investigators from around the country arriving this morning. Our morning started with an incredibly detailed which I want to thank the State Highway Patrol briefing with the State Highway Patrol and with the Director of the Department of Public Safety. Then we had our organizational meeting where we begin to just go through some of the questions we may have and some things we want to do throughout the day. And then the investigators began their work throughout the day. So I'll get into some of the things we did throughout the afternoon as I continue. But I do want to focus for a second on NTSB's personnel. We're here with 16 personnel. 9 are investigators for the NTSB. 2 are with our Family Assistance Program. Our Family Assistance Program, the professionals within that work with the families who lost loved ones, and they work with the survivors after tragedies to help them get them the resources they need and walk them through our process, and really they're with them throughout the entire investigative process. So just talking about our investigators, I really want to talk about their expertise and what they're going to be looking for. Because we do, you know, when I say this investigation will take 12 to 18 months, and I will explain that, because we take action before that. You need to understand how in-depth our investigation is. And it is in-depth. We have an expert in highway factors here. And what that means is the investigator will be focused on the environment in which this crash occurred. They will look at roadway conditions, roadway design, They'll look at weather, traffic volumes, and they'll look at the accident histories in this area. They'll also look at how traffic was queuing that morning with the previous crash that occurred. And today we did go on scene to get a visual. We have an investigator focused on human performance. That investigator will focus on the performance of the human operators. They'll look at fatigue. They'll look at distraction, medical conditions, medical histories, any medication being taken. They'll look at alcohol and drug testing. They'll look at their training that they've received in the past, the workload, equipment design, and the environment in which they work. We have investigators for motor carrier factors. Those investigators will focus on operations of the driver and the motor carrier, any driver and the motor carrier's compliance with state or federal regulations. That includes hours of service regulations, that's work and rest time, and licensing requirements, including the commercial driver's license. We'll look at medical certification. If you have any sort of medical issues, you might have to get medical certification from FMCSA. That's the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. We'll look at oversight of the companies and the overall safety culture of the company, including fatigue management or their vehicle maintenance practices. Then we have investigators focused on survival factors. These investigators examine injuries to the occupants as it relates to the dynamics of the crash. So they'll look at seatbelts. Were there seatbelts? Or any damage to seatbelts. They will look at crashworthiness of the vehicles, emergency egress, whether there were emergency briefings. They will also interview first responders and develop a timeline, including communications of the different agencies that responded. We also have investigators focused on vehicle factors. These investigators are focused on the mechanical condition of the vehicles and past inspections of the vehicles. Now, we did begin an initial look today at all the vehicles. We have investigators focused on crash reconstruction, and they map and document the crash scene and the vehicles involved. They analyze the physical evidence, include roadway markings. They will review the drone footage, the excellent drone footage and pictures that the State Highway Patrol took, and they will begin to reconstruct the crash sequence. In addition to that, we have, like I mentioned, we have our family assistance team. Now, our family assistance team today began reaching out to the families. They school, and as I mentioned, they will support the families and the survivors throughout this process. I do want to mention there was significant help from the Ohio State Highway Patrol with respect to the families and the survivors as well, and we so appreciate that support. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how our investigative process works, and this is for every investigation that we conduct. We call it the party process. So we invite entities in that we believe are experts that can provide factual information about this crash, and we begin to gather facts with them. It helps in making sure we have the right facts, and also provides the entities with any safety deficiencies that may need to be addressed well before our investigation is completed or a final report is out. They are not part of NTSB's analysis. That is us alone. That is, we're an independent agency, so that's something that we will conduct later on in the investigation. Now, the parties to our investigation is the Ohio State Highway Patrol, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, And I do want to recognize, I spoke with FMCSA's administrator, Robin Hutchison, a few times over the last few days and really appreciate her support. Also party to the investigation is Daimler Trucks North America and the Ohio Department of Transportation. We could always add more parties as this goes along in the next few days or even months, and so we don't have others right now, but could always add them. So just to give you an idea of what we're going to be doing over the next few days, our investigators will document the crash site, the vehicles, and they'll begin to gather all the factual information. Factual information like inspection history of the vehicles, as I mentioned, driver's hours of service. And then in about 2 weeks, we will issue, 2 to 3 weeks, we'll issue a preliminary report. That preliminary report contains factual information. It does not contain the analysis portion of the investigation. But as I said, this investigation may take us between 12 and 18 months, but at any time in that period, we could issue urgent safety recommendations. If we see something, we do not hesitate to issue urgent safety recommendations to address any sort of safety deficiency. Now again, I just want to remind folks that our focus is on safety. Our whole mission is based on determining how this happened, why this happened, and to prevent it from reoccurring. Now, just along those lines, we have investigated a number of crashes over the years involving motor coaches with kids on board. We've issued several safety recommendations, so certainly we're always looking to see if there are any similarities with previous crashes. We don't know that yet. It's too early to tell. But it's incredibly heartbreaking, and our whole goal is to prevent that. So before I turn this over to the Colonel, I want to just mention several thank yous. I think you will find here tremendous outpouring of support as a result of this, cooperation and teamwork, which is incredible at times like this. So first I want to thank Governor DeWine, who I met with this afternoon. I want to thank the governor's office. I want to thank Senator Brown, who I also spoke with today. I hope to connect with Senator Vance. We have missed each other. I did speak with Congressman Bill Johnson, so I want to thank him. He asked, was there anything he could do? So in constant contact with him as well. Of course, I said the Ohio State Highway Patrol. I cannot underestimate, or I'm underestimating when I say their motto is service with a purpose. It's an understatement for you, because it's incredible what the State Highway Patrol has done throughout this. I mean, everything from their expertise on crash site, taking us to look to at the vehicles, their expertise working with family members and survivors, expertise in public affairs, just the partnership. It is an understatement. It is clear that you take to heart service with a purpose. Thank you. I also want to thank the Department of Public Safety's Director, Andy Wilson, the Ohio Department of Transportation, the Public Utility Commission. I mentioned the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and I have a host of first responder agencies that I would like to also mention. When I read this list, it is an extensive list that we owe a great bit of gratitude to these first responders, but incredible service. And you'll see this as I go through this long list of everyone who was part of this incredible response. Walnut Township Fire Department, Violet Township Fire Department, Basel Joint Fire District, Columbus Fire Department, Whitehall Fire Department, Jefferson Township Fire Department, Madison Township Fire Department, Franklin County, Truro Township Fire Department, MedFlight, Gahanna Police Department, and I want to mention something on the Gahanna Police Department. They were actually the first on scene because they were en route to a training and heard it from a dispatcher and stopped. So a big thank you there. Also thank you to St. Albans Township Fire Department, Heath Fire Department, Hartford Township Fire Department, Granville Township Fire Department, West Licking Joint Fire District, Buckeye Lake Village Fire Department, Licking Township Fire Company, Air Evac Life Team, Licking County Emergency Management, Licking County Hazmat Team, Thorne Township Fire Department, Licking County Sheriff's Office, Tuscarora's Sheriff's Office, Pataskala Police, the Licking County Coroner's Office, Tusky Valley School Administration, the American Red Cross, and a host of other first responders, including Good Samaritans on the scene, who chipped in at some of the worst times to help other people. And I also want to finally thank the towing company as well. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to the Colonel and then come back and we'll begin the round of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yesterday was a day of true sadness that will live in the hearts of many Ohioans forever. On behalf of the Ohio State Highway Patrol, we offer our condolences to the Tuscarawas Valley Local School community. I want to thank all the first responders who worked together and acted with such compassion to rally around the Tuscarawas school family. I also want to thank Madam Chair Jennifer Homendy and all of the staff with the National Transportation Safety Board for their presence in the wake of this tragedy. Madam Chair, the patrol will provide any and all resources to collaborate with your staff to ensure the investigation is thorough. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Madam Chair Homendy.
Thank you, Colonel. So we'll start with questions. If you can raise your hand and state your name and affiliation. First there and then here.
Hi, Jim Robbins with the Toledo Blade. You said that this investigation could take 12 to 18 months. How long of that time will be on the ground here in Ohio?
Probably into early next week.
And
Early
the
next week.
investigation shifts to Washington?
Then the investigation shifts to Washington, but there may be visits to company facilities or to get certain documentation. So that continues on. So our entire purpose on scene is to really get a look at, in this case, the vehicles are in a different location, but to look at the scene and to look at the vehicles and really get what becomes the perishable evidence, the things that go away or may not be there over time. Roadway markings is an example of that. So that is what our investigators are doing now. Over time, though, they'll look for all sorts of factual information that they can get through email, phone call, or visits. It doesn't have to be here, but they may be back. Yes.
Max Colby with the Columbus Dispatch. Were you able to retrieve black boxes from the bus and the semi-truck involved? And have you been able to read any of that data?
So there are electronic data recorders on some of the vehicles, which our investigators will look at. That has not occurred yet. We have that. We also have some camera footage that the State Highway Patrol gathered both which I think was external camera footage, including some camera footage from vehicles that were not involved in the collision but may have picked up the collision. So we'll be looking at all of that.
Isabel Hansen with ABC 6 in Columbus. I know there was mention of a crash that happened prior to the crash involving the charter bus. What can you tell us about that and how it could have impacted the second crash with the charter bus?
And for those who might not be able to hear, the question was on the initial crash and what we can say about that crash and how it may have impacted this tragedy. That is clearly going to be part of the investigation. That crash, we understand, occurred around 7:50-ish a.m. And then this one occurred about an hour later. So we'll look at how traffic was queued, and we'll look at measures for directing traffic. That is part of that's a standard practice of our investigation. We don't know anything right now and nothing we can draw from that. But it's part of our standard process and will be completed throughout the investigation.
Lisa, Chris from NTSB News. Did anything stand out to you today in your initial look at all of the, from the scene to some of the vehicles?
The question is, did anything stand out to me? You know, from a professional standpoint at NTSB, you know, we look at these things, these tragedies, the vehicle, the road conditions, and, you know, it's part of our investigation. But we're also human. I'm a mom, and I have a 15-year-old daughter. And so when I look at the vehicles or I look at the roadway conditions, you can't not think about the children that were involved, their families, the concern parents at home may have had. I mean, this was really tragic. This was a very serious crash, and so you can't separate those two. I mean, that's what makes us so passionate about our job, and you know, it's why we want to determine how to prevent it from happening again, and why we continue to fight to implement our safety recommendations that are issued. Great question, by the way.
The governor, about an hour ago, was asked a question about I-70 itself, and that was what he said was the first thing that came to mind was that this is a busy highway that is only getting busier, and he said, all I saw were trucks. Now, I know it takes 12 to 18 months to give an official recommendation, but is there any way before that recommendation comes out to help them or help them learn if there does need to be changes to I-70 in this area?
So the question is specific to I-70, but also a little bit broader on our investigation taking 12 to 18 months and whether we'll be able to assist the governor's office and others to make safety change. Yes. This is why we work in this party system, so that what happens is when we are gathering factual information from them, they are getting factual information from us. We are a very transparent agency, and part of our entire mission and vision and our core values is transparency. And so we provide information what we're finding to the other parties so that they can make immediate safety changes. They don't have to wait until the 12 to 18 months. And then if we see something more systemic beyond the state of Ohio that we really need to get word out on, we'll issue urgent safety recommendations, and we will not wait. So that help. Yeah. I do want to add here, 43,000 people die on our roads annually. 43,000 people. We just had a board meeting the other day on speeding and impairment. We have a public health crisis on our roads, and we need all hands on deck here. We need to take action to save lives. We've issued several safety recommendations over the years. We've literally given entities a roadmap on how to save lives. But many of those recommendations aren't implemented. If they're not implemented, safety change doesn't occur. That's the key, implementing the recommendations. If I sound frustrated, I'm really passionate about that and safety, yes.
Do you know at this point if all of the drivers involved have valid driver's license or
Oh, I will ask Kenny to respond to that.
Good afternoon. Kenny Bragg, NTSB. We have made contact with all the drivers, and with the assistance of the Ohio State Patrol, we have determined that everyone is licensed at this point.
Thank you, Kenny. Yes.
Lacey from 10 TV. You had mentioned cameras on some of the cars. Any of those directly involved in the incident, do they have cameras that may give you an idea of exactly what led up to this crash?
Yeah, and some vehicles did not have cameras, some did, so I want to make sure, do you want to address that, or do you want the? Yep, okay. I want to be very specific on which ones did or didn't.
Yeah, that is obvious of very importance to this investigation. Is something that we're working to obtain. It's still very early, and we just haven't reached a conclusion as to that point yet.
On which one? Adam? Okay. And then we're also looking for video from local businesses and other video from motor carriers that may have been outward facing and caught this particular collision. Yes.
I know it's very early, but like you talked about seeing all the vehicles in the shape they were in. That truck was a skeleton, and the bus itself. To talk about, do they have any idea, preliminary, what might have caused the fire on the bus? I know that this is very early, but that's been reported, and we just, I didn't know if there was anything that investigators found that might have caused that.
Yeah, our investigators will look into the fire. I will say, and this is, I want to say this, we've seen fire from contents of vehicles, we've seen fire from fuel. I don't want to presume what it is today, but that's something that will be part of our investigation, is determine the source of the fire. But there are a lot of fires after significant crashes and because of the fuel. You have to remember it wasn't just the motor carrier and the motor coach. There was an SUV that was also there in between the two vehicles.
Doral Chenoweth, Columbus Dispatch. The three adults who were killed in this accident, were they in that red SUV? Were they in a different vehicle?
Okay, so there were 5 vehicles that were involved. So how about I start with the ones farthest westbound. So not the end of the queue. So we had a commercial motor vehicle. Then there was the red SUV. Then there was the motor coach. There was another SUV. That group was traveling with the motor coach. And then there was the other commercial motor vehicle that had the most damage. So 5 vehicles had damage in some way.
So when we see pictures of that scene, between the bus and the truck, there's another vehicle in there somewhere.
Correct. It's very tragic.
When you speak of the initial incident that happened almost an hour early, it must have been further west of the scene. Can you describe, was it 100 yards ahead of the main scene? Was it a quarter mile ahead? Can you speak to that? Where was that incident and what was it?
So I'm not sure on the exact distance that the first crash occurred, but what I do know is it was west of this tragic crash scene that we had, but I don't know the specific distance from this crash that we're discussing today.
Was it a fender bender or was it more of a full-blown accident with officers responding and squads and things like that? How big was it?
I don't know. I don't have all the facts on that particular crash at this time. I just know that it was west of the crash scene that we're talking about today.
How was the bus driver? Are you able to speak to him? Did he walk out of the bus? Did he assist with the evacuation of his students on the bus? What was?
I don't have those. I don't have that information at this time.
And the truck driver and the main truck that became engulfed in flames, did he just walk out of that truck in the moments after the accident before the explosion, or was he dragged out?
I don't have that information. Again, the crash is under investigation, and what I will say is, these crash investigations take time, and it's incumbent and imperative that the Highway Patrol do everything that we can to make sure that any facts that we report are factual and true. So I don't want to speculate about what might have happened or what didn't happen until we fully know exactly what happened.
Part of that will be determined through witness interviews. So we'll interview a number of witnesses to try to piece together the timeline and who was where and what occurred. Our survival factors and human performance and others, investigators will look at that. They'll also look in the bus of who was seated where, and in the bus, in the seating arrangement, what injuries each person in that seat suffered. So it's a very detailed process, but what the colonel said, we don't want to speculate because we want to be absolutely factual on that.
Were there seatbelts on board the motor coach?
There were not seatbelts on the motor coach except for the driver.
Last question.
Yes.
You had mentioned some of the Good Samaritans who stepped in to help. Have you heard any other people, like the junior high band director who ran onto the bus? We've heard reports that he helped pull some of the students out. Can you kind of talk about those people who helped this from becoming a forced tragedy?
Yeah, I don't have specific details on what Good Samaritans did what at the time. We have reports of many people stepping in to help. I mentioned the one police department that was there just happened to be going by and heard it. And of course, the State Highway Patrol was there pretty quickly. There was a huge response here. So I just have to say thank you to those Good Samaritans and all the responders. Thank you very much. I will say for updates, please monitor ntsb.gov and also our social media accounts. Thank you.